Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon, founder and voice of Falcons Drip.
Welcome back, everybody, to Falcons Drip Radio. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, as always, and back on the podcast for a second time, we have John Vogel. And today, we're going to go over the Falcons draft picks. So now that we've kind of jumped into the first round pick, talked about Bijan, it's time to move to pick 38, where the Atlanta Falcons traded up for Mathew Bergeron. And just wanted to get your thoughts on Mathew out of Canada.
Yeah, so I know some people had him projected as a tackle. I think he played left tackle at Syracuse. And the one thing that was interesting about him was when you watched him, few times I watched him, he looked great. He looked awesome. Held up a left tackle, prototype, all this stuff. Then you watch him against Clemson. And who was it they played around the same time as Clemson? There was somebody else that they played and they lost to, right? About the same. Notre Dame. It was Foskey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was so Foskey and the Clemson defensive line just had their way with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I started looking at it, and a lot of it was his lateral quickness is not great. And so holding up a tackle, obviously, with the lack of lateral quickness is going to slow you down. It's not going to do a great job for you in protecting a pocket. And so I started thinking, well, maybe this guy's better at guard, blah, blah, blah. Now there's two schools of thought in the NFL. And one of them, predominantly the Blesto teams typically run with this. Blesto being, the scouting organization. It's a advanced scout organization. And it stands for the Bears, Lions, Steelers, Eagles, or Eagles, Steelers talent organization. And so several teams are in this co-op where they share data on advanced scouts type stuff. A lot of the Blesto teams take this sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? This approach to players and prospects where it's, hey, put them at the position that they played in college. And if they fail that, then move them somewhere. Other teams will try to fix the problem straight up and try to address it and move them to a new position and teach them that position and see if they take to it. And so I understand that both the schools of thought, because if you move the guy initially, you're not seeing if he can pull off what he's comfortable doing. And then, it potentially creates a lot of confusion for a guy. Whereas, maybe you live with the ups and downs if he plays the original position and then you move him when it's like, okay, once he understands I can't play this position, I got to move somewhere. And so you see this talked about with guard, tackle to guard. You see it talked about with corner to safety, different positions like that. So with Bergeron, to me, I was like, I think that he probably is going to end up being a guard. And the Falcons, I don't think you're taking him to play tackle. I think that you're pretty solid at tackle. I think that a lot of analysts thought that they were really solid at guard too, between McGarry and
Jake Matthews.
Right. So let me get that depth chart in front of me. Make sure I don't mess this up again.
Lindstrom and Hennessy.
Yeah, Lindstrom and Hennessy. Yeah, because McGarry, right.
So
McGarry's
he's coming in
tackle.
to compete with Hennessy.
Right, and I believe he's projected to play over Hennessy, and it's because he's honestly an upgrade. And so to me, I think that if you get somebody who is an upgrade in that position and you can add a player that will be that he can fill in a couple different places, even if he doesn't start right away, you got a guy that in a pinch can play tackle, but you want him to play guard. That's a good weapon. That's a good piece to add, right? Especially if we're talking about the run offense and wanting to predicate as much as you can on that, protect your young quarterback. So I know a lot of people were sort of, well, they should have, I don't know why they didn't go with a defender here, blah, 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 blah. Well, again, they just spent all that money on defense. So you're going to go ahead and take your first couple picks and put it on the offensive side and try to shore up any issues that you think that you might have.
Yep. And offensive line depth is that you can never have too much of it.
No, and you look at the USFL and the XFL this year, and that tells you everything you need to know about the importance of offensive line depth, because we don't have enough offensive linemen to be playing in the NFL right now, let alone these other alt leagues. Effectively, they really struggle with protecting the quarterback there. You really see a lot of inconsistencies in run blocking across the board. And, the top guys that played in the XFL, speaking of which, Falcons picked up one in Barry Wesley, who played with Seattle, the Sea Dragons. He's also on that depth chart right now. I think he's penciled in as a backup left tackle. These are all guys, like you're going to have injuries on the offensive line. It's going to happen at some point. Very rarely do you get through a season. An offensive lineman at this point, it's very difficult to get through 17 games, fully healthy, fully ready to go. You got to have the depth. And to me, if you could bring in a guy that can upgrade a position right now, you can get him in the second round, do it. 100%.
Yeah, people were, a lot of people online and were going nuts because they're like, what are they doing trading up for this guy? Who even is this guy? And, to me, he was a first round talent who slipped into the second round. So it was a no brainer to trade up and a position, one of their probably biggest positions of their biggest position of need on offense, and maybe one of their biggest positions of need in their entire team at this point.
Yeah, I thought he would probably end up a day two. I wouldn't have been surprised if he was day one. But I thought that the struggles against some of the top tier competition that he went up against Syracuse was telling. Now, granted, that's at left tackle, right?
Yeah.
And so you're looking at a tackle. And then when you talk about a guard going in the first round, that very rarely ever happens, right? Because a guard's just not going to impact in protecting your quarterback like a tackle is. So, day two, even at the top end of day two, getting up there, making the trade to go up and get him while everybody's worried about skill position. If you look at the draft picks around him, he had a bunch of wide receivers coming off the board, tight ends coming off the board. So people were worried about those skill positions because there was 4 wide receivers that were taken back to back in the first round. And everybody knew that run was coming on those position groups. So you go into that sort of direction where, okay, this is away from what everybody's doing. We can move up to this spot. We can get our guy. Do it. 100%.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it because it's just one of those picks where you're like, okay, perfect position of need. Not necessarily a perfect player, but a guy who's good value for that spot. And it wasn't like they traded a ton. I believe they gave up their second rounder and a 5th round pick or a 6th round. It was something like pretty light.
It was their second, 4th.
It was their second and 4th. Okay.
Which
so
you still had a
anything
4th round
crazy
at that point too. So, that's not a significant loss in capital. To go get a guy that you could plug in at tackle, let's say Jake Matthews goes down this year. Well, now you got a guy that can slide over there to left tackle.
Absolutely.
100%. Do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, and possibly, his arms are a little bit shorter, so I think I agree he is a guard, but
Which
maybe
I think you saw that length issue show up at the Senior Bowl too. He went down to the Senior Bowl, and he's also Canadian too. He's one of the guys that was born in Canada, came down and played college football here. But you saw that kind of show up a little bit at the Senior Bowl, and that was one of the big talking points, I think, with analysts that were there. We were all kind of, he kind of looks like he might have some issues holding up a tackle. So,
yeah, but maybe he works on a couple things, gets kind of familiar with the game, and maybe he can bump out to tackle more frequently.
Yeah, there's a spot starter. That's a spot starter tackle that could play, that could start a guard. That's no brainer.
Yeah. So,
and with that, y'all want to move on to a developmental edge rusher we got in what's his name?
Zach Harrison.
Zach Harrison out of Ohio State. So he's one of those guys who's big, long, has that Calais Campbell type frame. So I want to get y'all's take on him. I know he's not going to be a starter this year. He's most likely going to be a guy who rotates in and learns behind Calais Campbell.
So with Zach, I was critical of him, and I think I was critical of him because when I was being critical of him, he was being considered as a first-round pick. And I was like, no, he's not a first-round pick. I think that when you go back to the Ohio State Notre Dame game, he was matched up. I think it was Joe Alt he was matched up against most of that game. And Alt really handled him well. Alt will be probably a first-round pick next year in this upcoming draft class, by the way. But you saw certain plays where I think he had a sack in that game, and I had to point out, I said, look at the sack. It's not a play that, he creates. He's unblocked coming off the edge, And so the thing with Zach is a lot of guys coming out have this issue where they don't go into a rep with a plan of how they're going to attack this offensive lineman and set him up. And I've talked with a lot of different edge rushers, throughout the years here about the difference between them being in college and being a professional and being a successful professional. And it's really, hey, you're playing chess, right? You're out here. You are setting up this dude because you want to beat him. You want him to think that you're going somewhere where you're not. And you got to get him. You're in total control here. That's the difference between a rookie, like a college player, and a professional. And in college, a lot of times you can get away with using your length, using power, kind of pushing that guy back and then pulling off your little swim move or whatever, your rip. You're not going to get away with that in the NFL. These are pros. So with him, he doesn't have a plan that he's developed yet. That's what you're going to be working with him developing on the next year or two in the rotation, is to get him into a rep where he or into a understanding of how to attack somebody with his hands, setting them up with his movement. Are you going to inside, outside? That's the other thing too that, I think I've heard a lot of people talk about. Are you going to go inside or outside? If you got a two-way as a defensive end, that makes you a whole lot more valuable than when you're just a one-way, when you're trying to contain a running quarterback like Fields, like Jackson, like Hurts. And because there's certain guys that, when you're playing against them as a quarterback, you're going to be told you can't go inside. You got to go out, because if this guy gets outside of the pocket and he breaks contain, he's gone. We can't have that. And so what I'm talking about is having a plan in those two, when you have those two ways, you can go two ways, inside or out, and setting up that guy so that you get him beat. So, and that's that's what Zach has to figure out. But he has all the length, like you mentioned. I mean, 6'6", 274 is, oh my goodness, it's a great frame. As that third round is usually where you take these developmental guys anyways that you're hoping will pan out, that just need a couple little adjustments here. And if they take to it, then they're going to be great players. That's Zach Harrison. It's a good addition to add when you have a guy like Calais, who's been in the league for a long time, has figured out a lot of different things, has grown tremendously as a player, and now is a mentor and has been the last several years that he's been in the league. To get him around him, I think that's that's a really great comparison that you've got in terms of his body frame. Very similar. I think Calais is probably 20 pounds heavier than him at this point.
I think he's an inch shorter and maybe like 10 to 20 pounds heavier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Calais is huge.
Calais
but I think Harrison will probably add like 10 to 20 pounds and become that more of like defensive end / can move inside a little bit, because he's got the size to be able to move inside if he adds like 20 pounds.
So yeah, it's kind of that you can play the 5 and the 3 tech, right? That's kind of what you're looking at. You're hoping that Harrison develops into, because that gives you a lot of versatility as a defensive line, how you want to attack people, especially when we start talking about, the 4-3 defense and getting that fifth man, the under 4-3 under, right? Going into a 5-1 penny, 5-2 dog attack, that type of look.
So Harrison is 6'5.5", where Calais is 6'8", which is ginormous. But Calais Campbell's arm, his arm length is 35 3/4 inches, where Zach Harrison's is 36 1/4. So, yeah,
I forgot he was that long. Oh my goodness,
it's crazy. But
36 inches is like basketball player type stuff.
And I remember sitting there in the third round being like, okay, like did Zach Harrison didn't even come to my mind, because when I'm when you're looking at these and looking at these projections and they're talking about Zach Harrison going the first or second round, I'm like, okay, like I don't want him there. When they took him with the third round, I was like, okay, that makes all the sense in the world. How did I not put that together?
Because there's hundreds of players that we're talking about leading up to the draft, and there's no way, unless you have the draft board in front of you, are you going to remember all. Dude, this happens to me all the time when I'm watching the draft. I'm sitting there going, that guy's still on the board? Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. Dude, there's no way you keep up with all this, Yeah. So, but no, it's a good pick. I think it's a good pick.
And I think too, like, even when you look at these two picks, like our day 2 picks, the Atlanta's biggest needs were more edge help and help at the left guard. And when you go and you draft Bijan Robinson, and I know a lot of people were upset because, oh, it's not an edge, not offensive line, whatever. But you turn around and in the second and third round, you grab these two guys, like you have just got your edge depth and you just solidified your offensive line on day 2. And by the way, grabbed potentially the best player in the draft in round 1.
Yeah. And what is the name of this game? Like, people forget about the draft. What is the whole purpose of the draft? Get in there, get the best players that you possibly freaking can. That's the name of the draft. And taking chances, being aggressive, that's all part of it. And there's not going to be guys that are going to be perfectly and just, oh, we're completely ready for the NFL. There's not many of them that are left, if any at all, after the second round.
Mm-hmm.
All these guys that we're looking at pretty much are projects. So there's a few that'll pop out. Roschon Johnson, I think, going to the Bears. That's going to be a starter, day 1 starter for them. He's going to be probably very productive this year. I think Chase Brown with the Bengals in the 5th round ends up being really productive. You're going to get guys here and there, But when you can get into the 3rd round and you can get a guy like this with the measurables that he has, the upside that he presents, it's a bargain. It just is across the board. It's a really solid pick. You're not worried about him having to play right away. You don't need him to. You can let him develop. Make sure that he takes the coaching.
Mm-hmm. And
you got a good guy.
And he's got probably one of the best on-field coaches in the league right now, who has a very similar body type and probably plays in a very similar way. Like you can't
Campbell. Yeah.
You can't beat it. It's like I said, when they took him, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect.
When I took him and when I saw they took him and looked at the measurables, I immediately thought, Campbell's the perfect mentor for this dude. Very similar. He's a little bit shorter. He's got the long arms like him. And they're also both really big guys. Big enough to be versatile where they can be edge / inside guys, whether you want the 5 technique or the 3 technique. So it was really fun to see them draft him.
Now, what's funny too is the guy that drafted Calais with the Cardinals in 2008 was Jerry Hardaway. And Jerry he consults now at the Tropical Bowl. He's retired. He's an older man now. And it was funny. I was at the Tropical Bowl and I'm talking to Jerry and he brings up the story of him drafting Calais, talking about nobody on the Cardinals wanted to pick this guy in the 2nd round range, right? It's in the 50s and nobody wanted to take this guy. They were like, oh, he's not developed. He's underdeveloped, blah, blah, blah. And Jerry got up and he was pounding on the table in the war room for this guy. They took him and he's telling me the story. And one of the Falcons scouts was Vogel, and who was a 5th round pick in that draft.
Mm-hmm.
And he was there, and we'd all been talking earlier in the day. And I said, yeah, it's really funny that you bring that up because Bo's here and he was a part of that draft class and Calais is still in the league. And he's like, Bo, wait, Bo was in that draft? Where was he at? And I was like, dude, he's a linebacker at UNLV. He goes, no way, calls up Bo. Bo, you were in the draft class of Calais? But no, it's funny. Nobody thought Calais was going to be this great player, and there were a few guys. Jerry was one of them. He took him 16 years later, he's still in the league, and he's still dominating. Enough to go get a 2-year contract. He got a 2-year contract with Falcons, right?
1 year, but I think he wants 1 year. Like I think it almost felt like they want him there. He wants to be there, but I think he's kind of.
He's on his last leg at this point, which is not because of his physical ability, but just because he's like, yeah, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, and it takes a toll on you. And one thing that's like the signing of Calais Campbell, and we've talked about this before, Kyle and I, but the signing of Calais Campbell meant more for Atlanta for the actual person he is versus what he brings onto the field. Because him coming to Atlanta says, when you're at this stage in the game, you've been playing for 16 years, you want to win, and you want to win now.
Mm-hmm.
And him coming to Atlanta says they're ready to win, and they're ready to win now, which is just huge.
And that division is completely up for grabs right now, right? I mean, completely up for grabs. The Panthers are probably not going to be that competitive this year. They still got a lot of work to do. I don't think the Saints are they're putting their hopes and dreams on Derek Carr. Good luck. I wish you the best with that. Derek, great guy. I just don't know about the quarterback. And then Tampa Bay obviously losing Tom Brady, and they're kind of reeling at this point too, trying to keep that together. That division wide open. And the NFC and as a whole, with all the power really shifting to the AFC with the quarterbacks over there, that's where all the real star power is in the league right now is in the AFC. The NFC too is wide open. I think that the teams that you're really gonna have to worry about it's Philadelphia again. You're probably gonna have to worry about Dallas and Detroit. Outside of that, maybe Niners. Yeah, that's right. Outside of that, I don't know if you really have all that much competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And we went over like the schedule, talking about like the win-loss, and there's no reason Atlanta can't have 12, 13 wins just because the NFC is so weak. So
he predicted them at 12 wins, and I predicted them at 11, and we have them winning this division just based, even if their passing game isn't crazy good, and it's just like kind of middle of the league, maybe bottom half. They should win their division easily just based off how weak it is.
And the run, being able to run the ball as well as they're going to be able to. There's not going to be many. They're going to be a top 5 rushing offense, I think. With that offensive line, with that running back rotation, that's going to be a top 5 rushing attack in the league, I think.
I mean, look at what we did last year against Tampa Bay. We were down 3 scores at the end of the third and almost came back and won just running the ball.
And what cost you that win? A bogus penalty, right? Wasn't that game?
Oh yeah, Grady Jarrett.
Lays the quarterback on top of him. It gets a rough in the passer.
Was it Gerard Booger that threw that flag?
It was. Isn't he a notorious for calling games against the Falcons?
He's notorious for bad calls. So I saw some Falcons fans after that page one. They're like, make this man retire, get him out.
Well, the funny thing about that too, if you think about it, is you could say that he was abusing an elderly man in the way that he was tackling Tom Brady, but the
worst part too of that whole play is at the end, Tom Brady tries to kick Grady Jarrett and nobody does anything.
Yes, that's right.
They ended up fining Brady, I think, for that. But
probably
open your eyes, ref. Come on.
And I think was that before or was that after the Dolphins got hammered for the tampering with Brady? It was after, wasn't it?
After, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of frustration. You go through a divorce, now the team's getting penalized over you for tampering with you, and then you get tackled by Grady Jarrett, and you just want to take all that frustration out on him.
And he had gotten him 3 times in that Super Bowl too, so he's a lot of Grady Jarrett. One other thing I want to point out before we kind of wrap this part up. I didn't talk about hand size, but Zach Harrison has 10-inch hands. So if you take a ruler and you just take 2 inches off, imagine just like that.
Power. Yeah, that's going from pinky to thumb with hand extended, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking, massive hands. Like we quarterbacks typically you want them to have 9.5-inch hands. You can get away with 9. Anything under 9 is going to be an issue. That's why you heard about Kenny Pickett a couple years ago, having the baby hands and all that. But 10's ridiculously big. I think the biggest in this class that I saw was 10.5. So I forget who had those.
He's got a bear paw for a hand.
Basically. Yeah.
Calais had 9.5 at 6'8". So
Zach Harrison could palm a basketball. No issue.
Easily.
He might be able to palm 2 basketballs with one hand.
with those mitts, yeah.
So I asked you last time, and you said that there are no grades, but I'm going to ask you again. What would you grade day 2 for the Olympics? And you can give me the same answer you want. I actually look. I liked your answer, so
I like the direction, right? I like the direction. I like what they're trying. I like what they're looking at, the priorities that they're showing. Obviously, Harrison's a little bit of a project to this point. You're hoping that he develops up. We've seen, I think when you compare it to the Falcons' history, Vic Beasley is a great example of a guy that was a project coming out, had a lot of issues, had that one season of really great production that kind of made up for that first round pick that you spent on. But that's my point. It was a first round pick. And so to get a guy that's kind of similar in terms of what you need him to build up on in the third round is really solid. And then to get a tackle guard, a guy that can play on the left side. I don't know if I want to move him to the right. That's tough move. Asking dudes to move from left to right. That's a lot.
I heard it's like trying to wipe with the other hand.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like when you're going from left to right, and left to right is that you're mirroring yourself and trying to relearn that technique. That's a lot to do. So I think it's solid. Again, I can't put that's a 4-year project, man. That's a 4-year grade. I can't sit here and be like, oh yeah, A, B, C. I don't know, dude. I don't know how this turns out, but I see the direction and it's solid. It's not Sean Clifford in the 5th round.
And get ready.
You really hate that pick.
Dude, I was stunned when I saw that. I was like, with all the quarterbacks that are on the board right now, you're going to take Sean Clifford in the 5th round. Why?
What's worse, Sean Clifford in the 5th round or a kicker in the 3rd round?
Oh, Sean Clifford in the 5th round. Absolutely. 100% worse. What did Sean Clifford bring to your team? Outside, the dude is a 6th-year senior. Penn State didn't even want him to be the quarterback anymore. Those fans were like ready for him to enter the draft 2 years ago. And you're going to draft this guy in the 5th round when you could have signed him off the street? What? I don't know. That was weird to me.
So really quick before we end, did you see Compton talking about Vic Beasley when he was at Tennessee?
You're talking about
Busting with the Boys podcast.
Yeah. I know the podcast. I didn't see the clip. No.
So long story short, Compton saw. I think it's Compton. Who's
Will Compton? Yeah.
Who's
Will Compton and Taylor Lewan?
Lewan. I think so. So Lewan's talking about somebody gets stuck in the elevator before a game with Vic Beasley. And they're stuck there for like an hour before the game, and finally they get open. And he said Vic Beasley's pissed because he didn't want to play. And I'm just like, you know what? Like after watching him in Atlanta, I'm not surprised.
Well, he went to he was with Vegas this year in the XFL, and so that's his last. That was like last chance to try to get back in the league, and he was all right. He wasn't. I think that his production was somewhat low. I didn't hear. Well, no, come to think of it, no, they were having issues. I don't know if he played at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I think he was pretty.
Oh,
bad.
you might be on. Oh,
clips,
dang! Ooh.
But I don't think he was great stat wise.
No, he wasn't great stat wise, and he was okay. So he was helping open up other opportunities for guys inside. Yeah, no, I can't. I don't think he played that much at the end of the year because that was one of the things Rod Woodson was going on about his guys is we're playing the guys that want to play. I don't know if he played that much now that I think about it.
I met him, and he was just like an incredibly nice, quiet person, but you could just tell that he didn't love football. Like you could just tell he was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm just going through the motions. So
interesting.
Anyways, we will end on that one, and then let's get ready to jump into rounds 4 and round 7.
Sweet.
Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.